Each week on Culinary Confidential, Christina Cates, a seasoned foodie who has worked at some of New York City's top restaurants, will share her passion for the culinary world. Whether you're a professional chef, a restaurant enthusiast, or a lover of good food, Christina dives into the heart of hospitality, exploring the trends, triumphs, and challenges facing the food service profession. And you won't want to miss her chats with some of the most interesting and influential industry voices. And now, please take your seat at the table as Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates starts now, exclusively on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates. This show is produced in association with my dear friend, Lucas A. Ferrara. Don't forget, Restaurant Week is still going on in New York City for another 2 more weeks. So until August 17th in all 5 New York City boroughs, you can get a prefix lunch or dinner for a really good price. So take this opportunity to expand your restaurant network and try something new. Okay, we're going to get in a time machine tonight and dive deep into the past, exploring the fascinating world of food history. Listen, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, and I know I said it last week on the show, food is the common thread between cultures. It's not a want, it's a need, a necessity to live. You can't survive without it. So tonight, we'll talk about the historical side of food. I have Jay Reifel on the show tonight, and he's the co-author of a book called The History of the World in 10 Dinners, which covers over 2,000 years of culinary history and about 100 recipes. In addition to being an author, Jay is also a chef and a food historian and studied at the French Culinary Institute and trained at the Michelin 2-star Corton and New York's legendary WD50. He also competed on Chopped and beat Bobby Flay. Jay's perspective bridges scholarly research with accessible and engaging narratives, making food history approachable and relevant for all audiences. His work appeals to food lovers, history buffs, and basically everyone. History has never been my thing, but Jay has promised me I'll find this content relatable and very interesting. Now, you may be like me and asking, why do I need to care about what they ate 1,000 years ago? And I'll tell you. More importantly, Jay will tell you. Food history is extremely powerful because it helps us understand the evolution of heritage, of community, and our economy, like everything. It reveals how civilizations advanced, traded, relocated, and influenced one another through their ingredients and cooking techniques. By reviewing what people ate, and more importantly, why they ate it, we gain insights into agricultural practices, technological advancements, and even political power moves. Food history helps preserve traditions and identities. That's why I just did the show last week with Frank Giovanet about the importance of passing recipes down through the generations. These recipes and stories that are passed down often carry a message of resilience, adaptation, and sometimes celebration. Recognizing the social and cultural significance of meals fosters a deep appreciation for how food connects us to the past, shapes our present, and influences the future. And I wonder in 100 years or more what people will say about the food in 2025. The shelf-stable, everything processed stuff we call food that's laden with chemicals and synthetic inputs. But that's for a different show. For now, let me please welcome to the show Jay Reifel. This is an exciting night for me because history was not my strong suit. But you promised me you were going to explain this to me in a very approachable way, right?
Yes, I will. And I'm so glad to be here.
Okay, this is going to be good. So let's just start with, why do you think it's important to talk about the food history and for people to learn about it?
I think food history is one of the best ways for people to connect with history as a whole. I think history is often taught extremely badly.
Because it sounds boring sometimes.
Because it's often boring, and it's often a list of kind of disparate events that are unconnected, and you're not connected to, and you don't understand, and there's nothing to ground you in your history and the history of your family and the history of your country, which are the things that we really respond to. And there's few human interactions that are as powerful as the one you have over a table.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about what people ate in the past, you're often thinking about who people were in the past, why they ate one thing and not another. But it's a time machine, the way I see it. Mm-hmm. It is a way for you to say, this same thing that I'm doing right now, someone else did precisely the same thing. They tasted the same flavors. They had the same level of enjoyment that I'm having now 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And then you have to ask yourself, so who were those people? And how different from me were they? Because in many ways, they're very, very different. But in many ways, and this is the very core of what I'm trying to do, they're very much the same.
Yeah. I mean, breaking bread was the first business transaction. You're careful who you sit down and break bread with. And that's something that's lost a little bit today in just the fast-paced environment. Even like the business lunch that New York was so famous for, the 3-martini lunch, where you would sit down and you would do a business deal. Things like this, they happen over email, they happen over Zooms, and it's the face-to-face human interaction that is getting lost over the generations. But it all happened face-to-face, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. So let's just walk us through the book, because your book goes through 2,000 years. You have 100 different recipes. Should we start with like maybe the chapters, what each chapter covers, like the different cultures, the different times?
Certainly. I think there are lots of culinary history books that are either very, very focused on one period. They just do like Tudor England history or like medieval Europe, and they're focused very, very closely on that. And then there's kind of like these pick and choose modernizing books where they kind of go through a bunch of stuff and it's a bunch of tiny little vignettes. I wanted to create an actual sweep of history. So you actually had a sense of the human condition and the things that unite it, and have these through lines that progress all the way from ancient Rome, which is where we start, which is quite simply because that's where we have the first actual cookbooks, right? Not like some scribbles and not some notes and not like that might be a recipe, that might not be a recipe, but actual cookbooks that were meant for people to cook from. And one of my like very essential like rules that I try to really adhere to is that I work from primary source documents or scholarly texts or scholarship. I don't guess. I try not to improvise.
All facts.
It's all facts. I try to find dishes that appeal to a modern palate and that illuminate a culture, but I try very, very hard to never make anything up. And sometimes I find something that just like people will not like this, or I don't think this is particularly interesting. I mean, there's a lot of food, that's not that interesting, but a lot of food that is. So that's why, I begin in Rome. And I mean, a lot of kind of Western history does trace itself back to Greece and Rome.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of, Greek and Greek adjacent cooking in that book as well. Because, I mean, Rome was a sprawling empire that covered a great, Europe and East Asia. So we start in Rome.
Ancient Rome, first century.
And then we're going to work all the way up to right here where we are today. 19th century New York, well, not 19th century, but in New York City, which was a very, very weird and really exciting period for restaurants. But it's also the birth of, in America, the modern, what we consider a restaurant, what we consider fine dining, anything like that. And that chapter is going to go from rustic tavern food that's very, very similar to what's being eaten in England at the time to really the height of French luxury, but we'll get to that. So along the way, we're going to go to every continent. We're going to go, except Antarctica, and Australia. But actually, that is touched upon, if you think about it, in the Great Circulation chapter, which is a rebranding of what they used to call the Columbian Exchange and then the Columbian Circulation. But, I'm not particularly interested in that version of history because it's fairly inaccurate. I'm much more interested in this incredible way, in a microcosm, foods traveled all around the world.
Right.
And not just that tomatoes came from the Americas to Italians, but that limes came to Mexico. People forget.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought that. Where did they come there from?
The Middle East. Limes.
Okay.
Like, there is a beautiful microcosm. Like, right there is a perfect microcosm of food history, that oranges came from the Middle East and went to Spain when Spain was a Muslim caliphate, and then subsequently came from Spain to the Americas.
Right, to Florida.
To Florida, precisely. And I think Florida oranges, those are from Damascus. That's where those oranges came from.
Okay, if you're just tuning in, I'm joined by Jay Reifel. He is the co-author of this really cool book called The History of the World in 10 Dinners. So the 10 chapters in the book cover different times and different cultures. So chapter 1, ancient Rome, the 1st century. Chapter 2, we're in Baghdad, 8th to 10th centuries. And then chapter 3, we're taking a tour of the Silk Road, the 13th to 16th centuries. Chapter 4, we're in Renaissance Italy, 14th to 16th centuries, which I want to hear a lot about that, okay? So don't skip on the deets. Chapter 5, we're in Tudor England, 15th to 17th centuries. And chapter 6, Al-Andalus.
Yeah,
okay.
Muslim Spain.
Muslim Spain,
yeah.
8th to 15th centuries. Chapter 7, the Great Circulation, 15th to 17th centuries. Chapter 8, we're in Ethiopia. That's something that doesn't get a lot of talk time.
But a super exciting food culture.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. Chapter 9, we're in Versailles. Ooh, that sounds great. And chapter 10, we bring it back to New York City in the 19th century, a bustling time for New York.
Absolutely.
All right, where do you want to start? Chapter 1, ancient Rome.
I would say something else first. I would say that one of the things that is so interesting to me when you think about that structure and you think about, the periods chosen to focus on that we're going to talk about is the real question you ask yourself are, what are the great through lines that you see? What is the connection? And there's certain things that you see, which is why, for example, there's a whole chapter on the medieval Silk Road, because globalization is a buzzword. People hear it all, this age of globalization. Yet the age of globalization started 2,000 years ago. Like, the global spice trade was the engine for business, for finance. Like, the notion that, 1,000 years ago, you would take a nutmeg from an island off the coast of Indonesia or part of Indonesia off the coast of India, and that might travel across India and then might reach the Middle East. It might travel by a camel train across the desert and perhaps reach Alexandria in Egypt and then travel by a Venetian ship to Venice, where a buyer might take it probably on another Venetian, but maybe an English ship, to England, where this nutmeg is now worth more than a cow. Which is a really interesting
You're so
note.
passionate about this. You're so passionate about this. And I'm thinking in my head as you're saying this right now, I can't even get my Amazon package to come half the time. But we can get nutmeg on a camel, on a boat across the world. No problem.
It's truly incredible. And that is a funny example to me because one of the things a lot of people, when they hear about food history, there's a lot of nonsense they hear. And
what's some of the nonsense?
A really common one is you used to hear that spices in the Middle Ages were used to cover up the taste of tainted meat, like the meat was rotting.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Heard that a million times. Completely insane for a bunch of reasons.
Tell me.
First of all, the reason I mentioned the nutmeg is it does cost more than a cow. In fact, it costs a lot more than a cow. And also, if you have nutmeg and a cow, you're extremely well off. Mm-hmm. Regular people might have eaten meat, once or twice a year at the high holidays, like Easter. You might have a pig's head at Easter, very traditional. But if you can afford black pepper and nutmeg and cinnamon, you are the 1%. And there isn't really anything in this period. There isn't a big middle class. So,
right, you're either extremely wealthy or you're very poor.
Precisely.
And I did read that in ancient Rome, how they didn't eat the meat often. It was definitely a special occasion thing. And they ate mostly vegetables and grains and things like that.
Right. Most people just eat, throughout human history, people ate porridge. Like pretty much.
Porridge.
So you put whatever you had, grains and whatever vegetables you could find in a pot that you probably kept boiling most of the day with water. And that's what you ate. If you probably didn't have salt.
How bland.
Unless you're really lucky and live right next to the sea or like a handful of other places, you're not going to have salt. You're certainly not going to have sugar, which was considered magical a lot of history, and you're certainly not going to have spices. You might have you might know, those nettles are kind of cool, and you might have thyme grows. There's a lot of
some herbs
those things, but you're not going to have the spices that we think of as dried spices because they'd be fantastically expensive. So the other thing to remember is that anyone who is eating meat is not dining alone, like in the Middle Ages. If you're eating, you're eating with your court, and there was a whole established procedure of how you would eat, and then that the dregs of that would kind of travel down the food chain, to everyone. But you were slaughtering probably a whole calf, and you're eating that for 40 people. So the notion that calf is around long enough to get rotten, or that you would put something on it that was like worth as much as gold or silver to cover that up when you could just get another calf.
So that's fake news, as we would say, right?
Precisely.
What are some other fake news things from back in the day? Way back in the day.
Oh, man. There's also so many fake news today in the cooking world. There's just so many strange... Like, you probably learned when you were learning to cook never to wash mushrooms.
That's true. I mean, I've heard that.
You've heard that. People tell that all the time.
Wipe them with a damp...
You wipe them with a damp towel because, like, they're like magic little French sponges or something.
That's
like, they're going to soak up all the water in the world, which is, like, demonstrably false because you can, like, wash mushrooms, weigh them beforehand, weigh them afterwards, and they weigh the same.
Do you know what's funny? I usually wind up just eating dirt. I'm not kidding you. When I'm making mushrooms, you better believe I'm eating dirt because I'm never getting all the dirt off with that damp cloth.
No, you never.
And then I just say, forget it. It goes in the stir fry.
My advice to you, just wash them. It's fine. You can't tell the difference. No one, people say, and maybe for like the most expensive mushrooms in the world, it might change the flavor a little bit.
Not my white button mushrooms from Trader Joe's, huh?
No.
So what was the most surprising thing you learned while researching this book?
Wow, that is a hard one.
Well, then don't pick just one.
Yeah, there's so many amazing things. I would say the great insight that I had while researching the book, and it's kind of obvious, is that every great culture has like a soul to their food, has something that kind of grounds that style of food, and it can be different for different things. A funny thing is that almost every great culture has a great umami sauce.
Ooh, yeah.
Like the classic one, and I think this is another great example of something that's wildly misunderstood, is the Romans loved garum, fish sauce, which is a sauce. And I remember when I was younger, you'd see these things like they ate a sauce made out of rotten fish.
But was it like a stew?
No. It's a sauce. Like it's a sauce. In fact, you know what it's really similar to?
What?
Fish sauce. Thai fish
like
sauce.
a Thai fish sauce. Okay.
Which people, 20 years ago, people were horrified by that. And now everybody thinks it's great.
Yeah.
But it's actually very, very similar. But it's the misunderstanding of what transformation and fermentation really is. That, you leave a fish on the counter for a week, you do not want to eat that. You pack 500 of those fish with their innards inside in salt for 6 months, and you carefully strain this incredible glutamate-rich fluid that comes out. That's an umami bomb. And it's the same also like you leave a handful of soybeans on the edge of your couch and they get moldy and they're gross. A week later, you may not want to eat that. You do precisely the same thing. You mix them with water. You ferment them for a very long time. You strain it, you get this incredible sauce, soy sauce.
Yeah.
I
love soy sauce, by the way.
Absolutely, and fish sauce.
I love soy sauce more.
They're both marvelous sauces. I don't think I don't have a strong, like, I love them all. But if you live in 10th century Baghdad, then you take barley and you wrap it in grape leaves and you let it ferment and you let it ferment for months and months and months. And you do this at the right time of the year because it's often too hot and dry. And you mix it with water and you let it ferment. And you get muri, which is an amazing fermented sauce that's a lot like super thick soy sauce. But it's a remarkable sauce that I actually had to work with a food scientist because I didn't have the 6 months to ferment it, to figure out what that sauce would actually be similar to. There's also a lot of recipes from that period for fake muri, like if you don't have the time to ferment it, that use spices and stuff. So that gives you some other idea of what the food components were. But the same way that like Chinese food is dominated by soy sauce and ginger and garlic, basically that's your kind of stuff, and French food has mirepoix and veal stock and master sauces. Every culture has a thing that ties it together. The other strange thing that, like, I'm obsessed with the height of 10th century Baghdad because it was such this incredibly brilliant and literate society. That's the reason that we have so many of the classic Greek texts is because they were translated into Arabic and then translated into Latin, and then, now we have these books because they were saved by this amazing literary culture. But the one thing that period loved was sourness. Sourness in all its little variations. They liked the juice of unripe grapes. So many different kinds of vinegars. So many fermented dairy products where they would take whey and yogurts and all these different ways of going for sourness. And that and Muri are the spirit of, like, that culture,
Let's leave it right there. We need to head to our first commercial break. Stay tuned. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
We're diving deep into culinary history this evening. Holding our hand along the way is Jay Reifel, co-author of the amazing book, A History of the World in 10 Dinners. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Why did you choose these 10 particular dinners and time periods for the book?
I think the short answer is that I'm limited to some extent by what material actually exists, what you can get your hands on.
That's a great point.
And we're incredibly lucky in that we live in a time where you could actually find a lot of these materials and the actual materials online and translated, with good notes. And the one thing I discovered is that some of the nicest people in the world are academics and translators. If you reach out directly and just, email someone who translated some obscure manuscript from whenever, they are more often than not really happy to talk to you. And
Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to that helped you translate along the way?
I have to give a shout out to Nawal Nasrallah, who translated the Annals of the Caliph's Kitchen from 10th century Baghdad, because it is perhaps the world's greatest cookbook, and it's this monstrous tome, and it had to be a labor of love.
Were there any recipes that you debated leaving out or wish that you could have included?
There were so many recipes that ended up on the floor. I mean, there are just, like that book that I just mentioned has 500 recipes or something. Whereas if you're looking at like 14th century Venetian cookbook, it might have 50 recipes. So there's only so many recipes I could do. And I did try to present every dinner in a modern manner, and this is inaccurate. This is a fudge. Like, my dinners all go kind of from starters to main courses, usually meat, and end with sweets, which is not the way that would have been eaten in ancient Rome. It's not the way it would have been eaten.
How would it have been eaten?
Baghdad. Different cultures do it different ways, but usually either an endless series of dishes or most things were done feast style in a series of big courses without the differentiation of sweets versus savory food. Often
it was like all
cold,
together,
hot, being served at the same time. And dessert is a very modern invention, like this idea, although weirdly enough, some things about it, like the cheese course at the end, actually has its roots in ideas of humoral medicine that go back 2,000 years. So I did massage the dishes and choose the dishes in an order that fits our modern conception of a dinner party.
All right, well, let's start at the top. Let's start at chapter 1, where we're in ancient Rome. What is, one of the dishes that you highlighted, and tell us something about that time?
One of my favorite dishes in that is, it's kind of a double nod. The actual dish is chicken stewed with truffles and peaches.
Truffles?
Which is kind of a strange combination. I mean, they're in Italy. Truffles come from Italy. And that dish is
I don't know. I didn't think they would know about it back then.
This is the whole point, Steve. Right? They knew. These are incredibly
did they have the truffle-smelling pigs back then?
They certainly did.
Oh, okay.
And they also ate pigs.
I told you I was not good in history, Jay. You didn't believe me.
This is the beauty of it, though. This is it. Right. This is why I do this.
Educate me. All right, so we got chicken stew, the truffles, and peaches.
And it
does sound lovely.
The other things that make that dish such a perfect standout is it uses a spice called silphium, which there's a lot of scholarly debate about what it actually was because it's extinct. It was also so valuable, it appeared on Roman coins. But we're pretty sure that it's quite similar to asafoetida, which is a modern spice used primarily in Indian cooking. So that dish, I thought, it's delicious, it's interesting, it's kind of surprising, and what I ended up doing with it is I gave reference to a very famous dinner, which is one of my favorite actual historical dinners, called the Black Dinner, or the Dinner from Hell, which was a dinner given by the Emperor Domitian, which was basically a flex where he ordered a bunch of senators to come to dinner, and he's the emperor, you come. And he served them a dinner that was all black, off tombstones that had their names on it, off black plates with a beautiful boy servant also painted black. And they were all totally convinced he was going to murder them because that's the kind of stuff he did. And then he sent them all home and they all went, oh. And then he sent an emissary a little bit later and now they're like, okay, now he's actually going to kill us. But no, it was all the stuff from the dinner, which was all, the plates were actually all gold. And they were all given to them as gifts. It was just a crazy flex.
Are we able to get this in an audiobook by chance? Because I just got to tell you, I read the book, but having you explain it to me in person, like hearing your voice and the passion behind it, it translates differently.
Oh, we're not, but that would be amazing. Yeah, there is no audiobook now. But that's lovely.
That would have been
Rizzoli,
a nice
are you listening?
Rizzoli, yeah. Let's get that going. All right, chapter 2, move us to Baghdad, 8th to 10th centuries.
Okay, this is so hard because I love it. But I'm going to give you an example of a dish that is so sophisticated, and that's the reason I chose it. Because I think also today, like, people have this idea. You hear the word Baghdad and you don't think amazing, sophisticated culture.
Correct.
But at one point, we're talking about the jewel of the world. So there's a dish that's called a fish simultaneously roasted, braised, and fried. And what it is, you take a very large fish and you wrap the middle part in a lot of oiled fabric, and you put some heavily oiled fabric thinly on the tail, and you put it in a very hot oven so the head roasts and the center part of the fish cooks gently and braises, and the tail, which is the thin, fries. And then there's an even more insanely complex version of the same dish where you actually skin it first and you grind up all the fish with herbs and spices and you stuff it back together and then you tie it all together with reeds and you do precisely the same final cook. And it's just such an incredibly sophisticated dish that you can't hear about that and not think, wow, that culture's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Nothing like that exists today. All right, chapter 3, walk us down the Silk Road, 13th to 16th centuries.
The Silk Road, there's so much fun stuff because that's a survey chapter and it goes from India all the way to Venice. But I'm going to actually say the one that's weirdly close to my heart. There's a Mongolian bear stew from the great Mongol Empire, like Genghis Khan. It's a very aggressive stew. It's quite delicious. I have served it at the James Beard House with kumis, which is fermented horse's milk.
That's not something you hear every day.
Nope. There's a price. The Tashkent Market in Brighton. You can get it.
I'm okay.
It's kind of like thin yogurt. It's good. And baijiu, which is actually the most popular alcohol in the world, but it's from China, and it's a really strong and gnarly. And the funniest part is the first time I did it, I also cooked a version with beef and not bear meat.
Okay.
And I was very pleased that no one ordered the beef.
Can you even get bear meat anywhere?
You can. It's farmed bears. And I actually once had a desperate situation where there was a bear shortage because they cull twice a year and they were kind of out. And I was calling around and I finally managed to get just enough for the dish.
What does that taste like?
This preparation is so it's kind of a gamey,
like a lamb?
Yeah, it's like
a venison.
Yeah, it's in that thing. This preparation is very aggressive though. So
okay, maybe not for me. All right, bring us to Renaissance Italy, 14th to 16th centuries.
Oh wow, that's a great chapter.
Is that your favorite one?
I don't have a favorite one, but no, that's where the West catches up. That's the first time you see cookbooks that are rivaling what they had in the Arab world 500 years earlier. I would say one of my favorite dishes is actually, it's almost similar to a spiced vinegared ossobuco, only in that makes the house smell like Christmas, and it's just delicious. There's probably more intellectually exciting ones, but that one's just close to my heart.
Okay. Well, listen, we're going to finish up with the rest of these chapters when we get back from the break. And you've given us all the recipes, but we got to talk a little bit of history as well with it, right?
Sure.
Okay, let's do it. Stay tuned. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome back to the show. I have Jay Reifel. We're discussing a book that he co-authored, A History of the World in 10 Dinners. This has been a fascinating night so far, Jay, and you've already taught me a thing or two.
Thank you so much.
I'm the perfect student for this lesson, right?
Marvelous.
We left off on Chapter 4, which was Renaissance Italy. We're going to move into Chapter 5, Tudor England. What were they eating?
That's an easy one for me. This is probably my most well-known signature dish, and it's totally insane. It's a dish called a cock and thrice.
Cock and thrice.
A cock and thrice.
Say that 3 times fast.
Cock and thrice, cock and thrice, cock and thrice. It is a mythical animal, and it was very
popular. Like the chupacabra?
Very, very similar. It is. So what the dish actually is it's half of a capon, which is an emasculated rooster that gets fatter and less aggressive because of that. And it's sewn to half of a suckling pig.
Whoa.
And then stuffed with more meat and spices and roasted whole. And it's just terrifying.
What was the purpose of this?
Well, they already eaten everything else. Tudors were really into eating all sorts of different animals, like porpoise and platypus and this and that. And, they're we've eaten everything. Okay, I want a mythical animal.
Yikes. Okay, let's get out of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Al-Andalus, 8th to 15th centuries.
Oh, picking a favorite dish is tricky once again because there's a lot of really delicious food in chapter. I'm going to pick an interesting one because, again, I think it illustrates some misunderstandings about the world in that Al-Andalus is a Islamic caliphate in what is now modern Spain. So all of Spain was, an Arab Islamic caliphate for 500 years. And under that caliphate, other people of other religions, Christians and Jews, because they're all people of the book, they're people who follow an Abrahamic tradition, those people were totally welcomed into this very peaceful society, and they just paid kind of a tithe. So one of the most interesting things in a Islamic Spanish cookbook from that period is a Jewish dish, and it's a Jewish casserole that you bury in the ashes of your fire the day before the Sabbath, so it cooks overnight, and you can eat it without the violation against cooking on the Sabbath.
Oh,
and
how
this
smart.
recipe is appearing in this Islamic book in Spain. Like, to me, that is such a teachable moment.
What was in that casserole?
It's lamb and spices, and then it's separated by pancakes, essentially.
Oh, wow.
It's really good.
All right, bring us to the Great Circulation.
See, this is, what people might call the age of exploration, or, and this is the time when primarily European ships connected disparate places. This is where we reached the Americas. And
Till that nutmeg got over here.
Precisely. Finally. And one of the most successful people to do this were the Portuguese. And a dish that is close to my heart, actually, is a Indian pastry, partially because I love Indian pastries, but it is only in two places in the world you find it. You find it in the Philippines and in Goa in India. And it's an egg-based pastry made with coconut milk, where you make a batter and you pour it, and you put it in a very hot fire, and it bakes, and you pour another layer, and you pour another layer, you pour another layer, you pour another layer. And it's one of the only places in India where you have egg-based pastries, because the Portuguese have this very, very famous egg-based pastry culture, the custard.
Yeah.
Do you know why they have?
No, I just know I love them.
You're going to love this. So, Portuguese nuns have these enormous starched habits, like that project over the front of their heads. And those habits were originally stiffened with egg whites, which left them all these egg yolks. So Portuguese nunneries opened bakeries to bake stuff with the egg yolks. And that's where the classical Portuguese egg tarts come from.
I just posted that on social media about that.
I saw it.
A couple of weeks ago.
This. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. You should have told me at that time. That's funny. I love those.
Those are so good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Now you got me hungry, Jay. Jeez. All right. Chapter 8, Ethiopia. That's an underrepresented culture, I feel like, even in today's age when it comes to culinary.
It is. And it's interesting and a very sophisticated food culture. And focused on a feast given by Emperor Menelik II and Empress Taitu, which is in the late 19th century, because it represents the birth of modern Ethiopian cuisine, because it was the first time all these disparate eras are being joined together. One of the things I find incredibly interesting about Ethiopian food is when I talk about the soul of the food, this is a culture that basically has three things that really, really define their food. And one is the beriberi spice mix, and one is the cultured spiced butter. And actually, I would argue that Tej honey wine is also a big part. And those three things you just find in everything. My favorite dish, however, is this crazy... It's called a whip-cut leg of lamb, and what you do is you cut a leg of lamb in this elaborate zigzag pattern so it hangs down, sort of like the whisks you would whisk away flies with, and then it's raw, and then you make this incredibly fiery pot of delicious stew, and you just dip the ends in that you want to eat them and cut them off and eat them. And it's just elegant and beautiful.
Oh, wow. All right. Chapter 9, what are we eating?
Oh, man. Versailles is just...
Decadence.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, for me, in a weird way, this is going to sound crazy, but it's the potage of peas, particularly the one with frog legs, because...
Very French.
Peas were this, boutique food. They were grown in hothouses. If you wanted to impress somebody in Versailles, you gave them a pea dish. And there's a very elegant one that has these pan-fried frog's legs on top. And it's very, very beautiful. And it's elegant, but it's just also not necessarily what you would expect.
It's a little more subtle than I was anticipating.
Yeah.
But I think that tracks. All right, Chapter 10. We're in 19th century New York City, my favorite city. What's going on there?
So this is really interesting because, like, this is where we start to get at least restaurants that you and I would like understand as restaurants. This is where Delmonico's was the height, and there was 7 different Delmonico's, I believe, right? But there was the height of culinary fashion. And my second favorite cookbook in all of human history is The Epicurean, which is published by Charles Ranhofer, the chef of Delmonico's. And it's this insane tome. It's like 2,000 pages and heavily illustrated, and you have to check it out.
I've never been to Delmonico's. Isn't that a sin? It's a sin.
Neither have I.
Okay, we're going to have to go together, Jay.
Well, I also haven't either. So, I mean, you make
Ryan's
that
on
3
board.
people in the studio who have not been to Delmonico's.
I do like Keen's, however.
I've never been to Keen's. You know what it was? Because I worked at the Palm.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, I can't go to another
You can't.
steakhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Traitor. But they're closed.
So the test of a chef in the 19th century was actually these elaborate cold dishes, these very French chauffois-like items. And the one I did is a ballotine of squab a la Madison, which is, I'll never get these hours of my life back. So you take a pigeon, a squab, and you bone it out. And you fill it with ham and foie gras and truffled forcemeat, and you bake it in a semicircular mold, and then you chill it under a weight, and you take it out, and then you put it back in the mold with chauffois sauce, which is a stabilized white sauce, and you chill it again, take it out of the mold, you decorate it with an elaborate truffle, and you put it back in the mold with aspic. You take it out of the mold, and you get this thing that looks like
labor-intensive,
like a beautiful little French pastry bomb. And then, in theory, and I always say I've never done this whole recipe. I've done that, and I made 40 of them, and it took me 2 days. And then you put it on this armature with 12 arms, and then you take fat and wax, and you carve griffins holding scallop shells.
This is so labor-intensive.
Put it on top, and then you decorate it with truffles and coxcombs, and it goes on. The description just goes on for another whole page. So someday, perhaps, I will do the rest of it. But it's
Not
just
today.
total madness.
Wow. I mean, it's so involved. Maybe, did they have too much time on their hands back then?
Maybe we do now.
Maybe we do now. All right, listen, I just need to know, how does knowing food history help us make better decisions today, whether it's in agriculture, sustainability, food justice?
I think knowing history is incredibly valuable, and knowing it in a way that you can actually connect to is perhaps one of the best things for humans. Like, I think it enhances our humanity. I think there's almost always lessons that can be drawn from history, whether it's why is silphium the most valuable spice in the world at one point? Why is it extinct?
Yeah, why is it extinct?
I think partially because Rome fell, partially because the weather changed. So it's like you're going to see the same lessons over and over and over again through history. And I think if there's a single thing that you can learn from food history, it's the appreciation that people in the past were just as smart as we are. That they were incredibly sophisticated, and they did a lot, usually with a lot less resources.
That's true.
So if they could do it, we could do it.
I love that. What do you hope readers walk away with after finishing your book?
First of all, I hope they have the desire to cook some, and I hope they have the desire to cook for their friends and to eat.
You
with
want
their
them to make
friends.
cock and thrice?
Yes.
Okay.
I had to say it.
I've been dying to say it the whole show, and then you beat me to it before. No, it's a great book. It's so well done. How long did it take you to come up with all these recipes, like to go through everything? This had to take years, a ton of research.
Well, I had been doing historical cooking for a long period before the book got picked up, and then you write a couple chapters and you create a book proposal, and then when they say yes, then you pull the trigger, and then it was an enormous amount of work, but it was really fun. Like,
I know, because you love it.
I do.
You're a chef, an author, and a food historian. Jack of all trades. All right, I want to know what's next for Jay Reifel.
Actually am doing a little bit more just regular teaching of cooking and more...
I think that's great for you.
Yeah, more regular cookbooks. I kind of take my experience and like my knowledge of ingredients, and I've turned it into kind of hopefully a new way of thinking about learning to cook.
How about like a spice line? Like, we got to make a brand out of this. Like, we got to bring Sylvium back of the Jay Reifel spice line. That's interesting.
I would love that more than life itself.
Forget about paprika and garlic powder. Like, let's get a little exotic with this. That would be great. All right, Jay, thank you so much. This was amazing. I feel so much more knowledgeable after reading this book. And it was something I had to really prepare for because, like I've told you off air, history's not my thing. Like, I started to read it and I would get overwhelmed, and I'm like, no. This is what you like. You like talking about food. Like, dive in. And I loved it. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates, Sunday nights at 9 p.m. on AM 970 The Answer. Tune in next week. I have Dr. Julie Gatza out of Tampa joining the show, and she says there are certain foods that increase your anxiety. She's going to share with us what those foods are and how to cope with it and heal your body. Believe it or not, a lot of it requires nourishment of the digestive system. But that's the show for tonight. Thanks for listening and have a great night.
The preceding program is sponsored by Shake It Off Live, LLC.